Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Vaibhav Jyotsna Srivastav, and with me is Manoj Singh Rana, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment, and more. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls Gujarat Chief Minister to take stock of preparedness to deal with cyclone. First batch of anti-COVID drug 2-deoxy-D-glucose released for COVID patients. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh reviews efforts to fight the second wave of COVID-19 pandemic in the country. Lockdown restrictions ease in UK. All restaurants, bars, hotels, theatres and museums to reopen. Israel conducted dozens of airstrikes on the Gaza Strip as conflict continues in the region. India calls for extreme restraint and immediate de-escalation. And in tennis, Rafael Nadal beats Novak Djokovic to win the Italian Open. As the number of COVID cases is on the rise, we appeal to our listeners not to lower the guard, follow all the precautions, and all those who have taken the first dose of COVID-19 vaccine to get vaccinated with the second dose at the scheduled time. Stay safe and protected by following these 3 simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, and focus on hand and face hygiene. And now the news in detail. The extremely severe cyclonic storm Tauktae made a landfall on Gujarat coast between Porbandar and Mahua after 8 p.m. According to the IMD, the landfall process will continue for the next 4 hours. The maximum wind speed is likely to be between 155 to 165 kilometers per hour, gusting to 175 kilometers per hour as it crosses Saurashtra coast between Porbandar and Mahua in Bhavnagar district. Sources said that Diu has reported a wind speed of about 100 kilometers per hour. AIR Ahmedabad correspondent reports that the Gujarat government has already evacuated more than 2 lakh persons from 18 coastal districts in view of the extremely severe cyclonic storm Tauktae. Following the impact of the landfall of cyclonic storm Tauktae, the coastal areas of Saurashtra and South Gujarat are witnessing heavy rainfall with stormy winds. The Gujarat government has deployed more than 44 teams of NDRF, apart from teams of SDRF police, 5 brigades for rescue and relief works. Early in the day, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called the Gujarat Chief Minister Vijay Rupani and taken stock of the situation following the threat of a very severe cyclonic storm. According to official sources, Chief Minister Rupani apprised Prime Minister Modi about the full preparedness of the state to minimize the impact of cyclone Tauktae. Prime Minister Modi also offered all possible help from the central government to Gujarat in facing the threat of a cyclonic storm. Meanwhile, the centre has asked the Air Force, Navy and Army to be ready for help if a situation arises.
The Indian Navy is engaging in multiple search and rescue missions along the Indian west coast due to cyclone Tauktae. A naval helicopter was dispatched early this morning to rescue the stranded crew of Indian-flagged tug Coromandel Supporter 11, which was adrift northwest of Mangalore in Karnataka. Rough seas had resulted in flooding of the vessel's machinery compartments, rendering it without propulsion and power supply. The Indian Navy Hello was dispatched early morning after failed attempts to rescue by boat, and 4 crewmen were rescued safely. INS Kochi was swiftly sailed with the dispatch to assess the situation and render assistance on receipt of a request for assistance for a barge P305 adrift off Hira oil fields in the Bombay High area with 237 personnel on board. INS Talwar is also preparing to sail out. In response to another SOS received from barge GAL Constructor with 137 people on board, about 8 nautical miles from Mumbai, INS Kolkata has also been sailed with dispatch to render assistance. The first batch of the anti-COVID drug 2-deoxy-D-glucose has been released for the COVID patients on Monday. It was released by Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and Health and Family Welfare Minister Dr. Harshvardhan. The drug has been developed by the Defence Research and Development Organisation DRDO in collaboration with Dr. Reddy's lab. The drug was approved for emergency use by the Drugs Controller General of India, DCGI, recently. Congratulating scientists of the DRDO for this remarkable feat, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said this 2DG drug is an important milestone in the journey towards Atmanirbharta or self-reliance. He said the drug has brought a new ray of hope in these testing times. He added that it will reduce the oxygen dependency by 40% in COVID patients. Appreciating the efforts of the scientists of the DRDO and Dr. Reddy's lab for the development of this anti-COVID drug, Health and Family Welfare Minister Dr. Harshvardhan said that this is the result of 1 year of hard work by the scientists. Our correspondent reports that larger quantities of 2DG drug will be produced from the beginning of the next month by Dr. Reddy's lab. The drug will be provided to COVID patients by the hospitals. A report.
Clinical results have shown that this molecule helps in faster recovery of hospitalized patients and reduces supplemental oxygen dependence. Higher proportion of patients treated with 2DG showed RT-PCR negative conversion in COVID patients. The drug will be of immense benefit to people suffering from COVID-19. Pursuing Prime Minister Narendra Modi's call for preparedness against the pandemic, DRDO took the initiative of developing anti-COVID therapeutic application of 2DG. Being a generic molecule and analog of glucose, it can be easily produced and made available in plenty in the country. The drug comes in a powder form in sachet, which is taken orally by dissolving it in water. It accumulates in the virus-infected cell and prevents virus growth by stopping viral synthesis and energy production. Its selective accumulation in virally infected cells makes this drug unique. The drug is expected to save precious lives due to the mechanism of operation of the drug in infected cells. It also reduces the hospital stay of COVID-19 patients. Anupamish, AR News, Delhi.
Defence Minister Rajnath Singh on Monday reviewed efforts of his ministry, the Armed Forces, DRDO and other defence organisations in fighting the second wave of COVID-19. He also reviewed logistic support to bolster medical oxygen supply and health infrastructure in states. The meeting focused on special COVID hospitals being set up by DRDO in different states, creation of additional hospital beds in the military hospitals, supply of pressure swing absorption oxygen plants under PM CARES Fund, and augmentation of doctors and other health professionals to meet the current demand. Chief of Defence Staff General Bipin Rawat acclaimed the excellent coordination among the three services in providing assistance to the civilian administration, whether in terms of logistic support or creation of additional health infrastructure. He added that the Army has set up health facilities in far-flung and remote areas to aid the local civil administration. Indigenously developed Bharat Biotech's COVID-19 vaccine, Covaxin, has been found effective against coronavirus strains found in India and the UK. A study published in the medical journal Clinical Infectious Diseases said that Covaxin has been found to successfully neutralize all key emerging variants tested, including the double mutant strain B.1.617 and B.1.1.7. The study was conducted by the National Institute of Virology and the Indian Council of Medical Research, ICMR. Covaxin is one of the 3 COVID-19 vaccines that are currently available in India. Days ago, Covaxin became the first COVID-19 vaccine to receive a nod by the Drugs Controller General of India, DCGI, for conducting Phase 2 to 3 trials on 2 to 18-year-olds in India. The trials are expected to be completed in the next 2 to 3 months.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday interacted with a group of doctors from across the country and discussed the COVID-related situation through video conferencing. He thanked the entire medical fraternity and the paramedical staff for the exemplary fight displayed by them against the extraordinary circumstances of the second wave of COVID, adding that the entire country is indebted to them. He noted that be it testing, supply of medicines or set up of new infrastructure in record time, all these are being done at a fast pace. Several challenges of oxygen production and supply are being overcome. There are steps taken by the country to augment human resources, like including MBBS students in COVID treatment and Ashas and Anganwadi workers in rural areas provided extra support to the health system. The Prime Minister underlined that the strategy of starting vaccination programs with frontline warriors has paid rich dividends in the second wave. About 90% of the health professionals in the country have already taken the first dose. Vaccines have ensured safety of most of the doctors. The Prime Minister has also urged doctors to include an oxygen audit in their daily efforts. Noting that a large number of patients are undergoing treatment in home isolation, he requested the doctors to ensure that the home-based care of every patient is SOP-driven. He said that telemedicine has played a big role for patients in home isolation, and this service needs to be expanded in rural areas as well. The Prime Minister also discussed the challenge of mucormycosis and said that doctors may need to put in extra effort towards taking active steps in spreading awareness about it. He further underscored the importance of psychological care along with the importance of physical care. During the interaction, the doctors thanked the Prime Minister for his guidance and leadership during the recent surge of cases. They also thanked the Prime Minister for prioritizing the healthcare workers for vaccination. They informed the Prime Minister about their preparedness since the first wave of COVID and the challenges they faced in the second wave. The cumulative share of active COVID cases in the country has declined to comprise nearly 14.09% of the total reported cases. The Health Ministry has informed that currently over 35,16,000 people are reported to be suffering from the viral infection and are either hospitalized or are under home isolation. In the last 24 hours, the nation registered 281,386 new COVID cases. With this, the recovery rate has further improved to stand at 84.81%. Since Sunday, over 378,000 people have either been discharged from hospitals or are reported to have been completely cured. So far, over 2.11 lakh people have recovered from the COVID-19 infection in the country. 10 states and UTs, including Maharashtra, Karnataka, Chhattisgarh, Delhi, Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat and Kerala continue to be the major hotspots of the viral pandemic. Nearly 75% of the new cases are reported from these 10 states and UTs. The Health Ministry has informed that 4,106 COVID-related deaths were reported in the last 24 hours, taking the cumulative toll to 2,74,390.
And now let's take a look at the coronavirus updates from around the world. In Britain, all restaurants, bars, hotels, theatres and museums in England will reopen as the easing of social distancing rules that have been in place since the pandemic began. British Prime Minister said that the country has reached another milestone in the journey of the roadmap out of the lockdown, but called for caution. Mr. Johnson also said that the restrictions are being eased in England, Scotland and Wales from Monday, while they will be eased slightly later in Northern Ireland. The ban on foreign travel has also been lifted and replaced with new rules. In the United States, the country's Public Health Agency Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, has said that schools across the country should continue using masks for the 2020-21 academic year, as it will take time to vaccinate all the students. The new guidelines come soon after the agency eased mask-wearing guidance for people who are fully vaccinated against COVID-19. However, the CDC said that all people in school facilities and buses must wear masks at all the times. Taiwan's government has imposed its toughest restrictions so far as the island tries to battle a spike in COVID-19 cases. The authorities are shutting down cinemas and entertainment venues until the 28th of May, while limiting gatherings to 5 indoors and to 10 at outdoors. Taiwan reported 207 new infections on Sunday. The capital, Taipei, remains the main infection hotspot, forcing the city authorities to raise the coronavirus alert there to the unprecedented level of 3. Thailand has seen its highest number of daily cases, with the majority of the new cases stemming from the country's overcrowded prisons. Thailand admitted there were growing clusters in jails after several prominent activists tested positive. The Ministry of Justice had earlier said that the majority of the country's cases stemmed from 2 prisons in Bangkok. Singapore will close schools from Wednesday as authorities warned new coronavirus strains were affecting more children in the city-state. The government has been tightening restrictions following a recent rise in local transmissions after months of near zero cases. Australia will start reopening to visitors for the rest of the world only towards the later half of 2022, over 2 years after the country closed international borders. Making the announcement in a televised address, Prime Minister Scott Morrison said that the decision to resume international flight services will be guided by the economic advice. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia said on Sunday that most vaccinated international travellers will not need to quarantine upon arrival in the country. Previously, most travellers entering the country would need to quarantine for 7 to 14 days depending on where they are coming from. This is All India Radio giving you the world news.
3 steps to stay protected and stay safe from COVID-19. Wear face mask, 2 gaz ki duri to maintain social distancing, maintain hand and face hygiene.
Welcome back to the world news. India has urged both Israeli and Palestinian sides to show extreme restraint, saying immediate de-escalation is the need of the hour. Issuing a statement, permanent representative of India to the United Nations, T.S. Tirumurti, urged both sides to desist from actions that exacerbate tensions and refrain from attempts to unilaterally change the existing status quo.
The events of the last several days have resulted in a sharp deterioration of the security situation. The indiscriminate rocket firings from Gaza targeting the civilian population in Israel, which we condemn, and the retaliatory strikes into Gaza have caused immense suffering and resulted in deaths, including women and children. India has also lost one of her nationals living in Israel in this rocket fire, a caregiver in Ashkelon. We deeply mourn her demise, along with all other civilians who have lost their lives in the current cycle of violence. We reiterate our strong condemnation of all acts of violence, provocation, incitement, and destruction. Immediate de-escalation is the need of the hour, so as to arrest any further slide towards the brink. We urge both sides to show extreme restraint, desist from actions that exacerbate tensions, and refrain from attempts to unilaterally change the existing status quo, including in East Jerusalem and its neighborhood.
Mr. Tirumurti emphasized on the need for an immediate ceasefire and the resumption of dialogue between Israel and Palestine.
The absence of direct and meaningful negotiations between the parties is widening the trust deficit between the parties. This will only increase the chances for similar escalation in the future. We believe that every effort should be made to create conducive conditions for resumption of talks between Israel and Palestine. In conclusion, I reiterate India's strong support to the just Palestinian cause and its unwavering commitment to the two-state solution.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for an immediate end to the fighting between Israelis and Palestinians. Mr. Guterres warned the UN Security Council meeting that the fighting could plunge the region into an uncontainable crisis. He opened an emergency session of the Security Council on Sunday to discuss the worst outbreak of violence in years in Palestine and Israel, calling the violence that has killed nearly 200 people over the past week utterly appalling. He said the UN is actively engaging all sides toward an immediate ceasefire and called on them to allow mediation efforts to intensify and succeed. Meanwhile, Israel conducted dozens of airstrikes on the Gaza Strip on Monday after Palestinian militants fired barrages of rockets at southern Israeli cities. The pre-dawn raids on Gaza were some of the heaviest seen since the fighting began a week ago. According to reports, Israel said it hit facilities belonging to the militant group Hamas and several commanders' homes, but main roads and power lines were also damaged. There were no immediate reports of casualties following the strikes. The Israeli military said more than 50 warplanes conducted a 20-minute attack on the Gaza Strip shortly before dawn. They struck 35 terror targets and destroyed more than 15 kilometers of an underground tunnel network belonging to Hamas, it added. The military also said it had hit the homes of 9 high-ranking Hamas commanders. Hamas, which controls Gaza, began firing rockets, triggering retaliatory airstrikes. Israel says more than 3,000 rockets have been fired into the country over the past week. Rocket warning sirens sounded again in several areas around southern Israel on Monday. One rocket hit an apartment building in the city of Ashdod, and several people were reportedly hurt. Palestinian officials in Gaza, meanwhile, said the overnight strikes had caused widespread power cuts and damaged hundreds of homes in other buildings.
The State Minister for Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh, Shahryar Alam, has said that the recently published report of the US government on religious freedom does not reflect the ground reality in the country. In a statement issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, MOFA, of Bangladesh, after a meeting between the US Ambassador to Bangladesh, Earl R. Miller, and the State Minister, Shahryar Alam, in Dhaka on Monday, the minister said that the government is making its best efforts to ensure communal harmony and religious non-discrimination in the country. He cited the Vested Property Return Amendment Act 2011 and the Chittagong Hill Tracts Peace Treaty of 1997 as examples of the steps the government has taken in this direction. He said the Bangladesh government has taken action on the incidents mentioned in the report of the US government. The US government, in its 2020 report on international religious freedom released earlier this week, had listed several incidents against the minority communities and others in the name of religion. It cited example of a Sufi Muslim follower who was stalked and killed in July outside a Sufi shrine in Ghazipur. In another incident in July last year, the body of an infant was exhumed from a Muslim burial place and dumped on the road in Brahmanbaria district as the parents of the infant were followers of the Ahmadiyya sect. In January, unknown persons attacked several Rohingya Christian families at Kutupalong Maga refugee camp in Cox's Bazar. The refugees claimed the attack was due to intolerance against the Christian faith. In November, Hindu homes were vandalized and set on fire in Kamila district based on the rumor that they supported Charlie Hebdo's publication of the caricature of Prophet Muhammad. The report quotes the Bangladesh Hindu Buddhist Christian Unity Council, BHBUC, that communal violence against the minorities continued throughout the year. It counted 17 deaths in religious and ethnic minority communities between March and September last year due to such incidents. The US government report cited a statement by the World Hindu Federation which detailed incidents of temple vandalism, forced conversion, rapes and abduction of Hindu girls and women in Bangladesh. China's State Council has announced tough new laws halting the teaching of foreign curriculum in schools from kindergarten to grade 9, K9, and prohibiting the ownership or control of any private K9 schools by foreign entities. The new laws, which come into effect on September the 1st, are the latest in a series of measures intended to tighten control of the country's fast-growing education sector. China currently has private K9 schools that teach local and foreign curricula. As reported, members of the board of directors or any other decision-making body at a private K9 school must be Chinese nationals and must include representatives from the regulators, according to the Private Education Promotion Law published on Friday on a government website. The K9 schools will no longer be able to organize entrance tests or recruit in advance. Also, public K9 schools will be barred from establishing private schools or converting themselves into private schools. As per media reports, China is framing tough new rules for its booming private tutoring industry, aiming both to ease pressure on school children and to boost the country's birth rate by lowering family living costs.
In Karnataka, a study by the Bengaluru-based Indian Institute of Science has identified a set of molecular biomarkers which will help detect and predict viral or bacterial infections with high probability. It was discovered that a 10-gene RNA signature is produced in the patient's blood based on the quantity of viral and bacterial infections. The human body produces different types of molecules in the blood depending on the type of infection. Identifying the correct type of infection will help doctors prescribe proper antibiotics to the patients. The first author of the study, Satyabharti Ravichandran, who is a research associate in the Department of Biochemistry, says that if diagnosis is right, half the battle is won against the disease. The study will help differentiate between COVID-19 infections from bacterial infections. The study has been published in the eBiomedicine journal. Moving on to sports, in the Italian Open, world number 3 Spaniard Rafael Nadal overcame a mid-match surge from number 1 ranked Serbian Novak Djokovic to win the title 7-5, 1-6, 6-3 in 2 hours and 50 minutes for his 10th title. In the 57th meeting of the ATP Tour's most prolific rivalry, top seed Djokovic faced second seed Nadal for the 9th time at the Foro Italico. Nadal improved to 4-2 in Rome finals against Djokovic with a victory and brought his ATP head-to-head record against the Serbian to 28-29 overall. The victory also earned Nadal a 36th ATP Masters 1000 crown, equaling Djokovic's all-time record since the series was established in 1990. In the women's section, world number 15 Iga Swiatek wins the women's title by demolishing Karolina Pliskova of Czech Republic in straight sets 6-0, 6-0. England speedster Jofra Archer has been ruled out of next month's 2-test home series against New Zealand after his right elbow injury resurfaced. The 38-member Australian contingent stranded in Maldives will travel to Australia on a BCCI charter flight on Monday, and then they will undergo hotel quarantine. Cricket Australia's interim CEO Nick Hockley has praised the BCCI's effort to get the Australian players back to their homes. In the English Premier League, Liverpool goalkeeper Alisson Becker scored a 95th minute winner as the Reds beat West Brom 2-1 last night to keep a place in next season's Champions League in their own hands. Jurgen Klopp's men would have needed favours from Leicester and Chelsea in their final 2 games of the campaign had they failed to beat the already relegated Baggies. But the Brazilian was sent forward for a corner deep into stoppage time and headed home Trent Alexander-Arnold's delivery. Liverpool moved 1 point behind 4th place Chelsea and 3 behind Leicester. Meanwhile, Tottenham Hotspur kept their faint hope of Champions League qualification alive with a 2-0 win over Wolves Sunday night. In the Spanish La Liga, Diego Simonde's side came from behind to beat Osasuna and maintain their 2-point lead over Real Madrid ahead of the final round of fixtures. On the other hand, Barcelona decisively ruled themselves out of the race with a 2-1 defeat by Celta Vigo in what could be Lionel Messi's final home game at Camp Nou. The Asian Football Confederation on Sunday confirmed the withdrawal of North Korea from the Asian qualifiers for the 2022 FIFA World Cup and 2023 Asian Cup.
At the domestic stock markets, key benchmark indices rose for the second straight session today, while the rupee jumped to 1.5-month high against the US dollar. We have a report from the business world.
The Sensex at the Bombay Stock Exchange surged 848 points to close at 49,581. The Nifty at the National Stock Exchange jumped 245 points to 14,923. In the international market, global crude oil prices were trading in a tight range as European economic reopenings offset gloom from surging COVID-19 cases in Asia. So, Brent crude oil futures for May declined 43 cents to trade at $68.28 per barrel. U.S. crude futures fell 45 cents to $64.92 a barrel. Back home, on the multi-commodity exchange, gold contracts for June delivery gained 312 rupees to 47,988 rupees per 10 grams. Silver prices for July delivery rose 771 rupees to 71,856 rupees per kilo. And at the forex market, the rupee appreciated 7 paisa to 73.22 rupees against the dollar. Anubha Rohadki for AIR News.
And now a quick look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls Gujarat Chief Minister to take stock of preparedness to deal with the cyclone. First batch of anti-COVID drug 2-deoxy-D-glucose released for COVID patients. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh reviews efforts to fight the second wave of COVID-19 pandemic in the country. Lockdown restrictions ease in the UK. All restaurants, bars, hotels, theatres and museums to reopen. Israel conducted dozens of airstrikes on the Gaza Strip as conflict continues in the region. India calls for extreme restraint and immediate de-escalation. And in tennis, Rafael Nadal beats Novak Djokovic to win the Italian Open. India is celebrating the 151st birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favourite bhajan, Vaishnava Jan, by artists from Belgium. With that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.